On.
Hello, everybody, and welcome back to Dinosaur Days. It's been a while since I've done a video. I've just been way too busy lately to do YouTube. So, again, I apologize for the slideshow. It's kind of going to be random, and also a lot of the pictures I picked for this don't quite fit into the template, I guess, for the slideshow. It doesn't give me the option to modify it very much, so or at all really. I just select a file and it randomizes it, and there's not really a way to change that because I'm working off of a Chromebook. So to move on, I wanted to talk a bit about marine reptiles, and originally I had intended episode 3 of Dinosaur Days to be more about the ceratopsians, um, or possibly sauropods, um, because I think I did ceratopsians part 1, but there was a part 2 to that, so I will be touching more on ceratopsians later. Um, so I wanted to start by talking about the ichthyosaurs, because really they were um, like the first real reptile, or at least one of the first reptiles to truly return to the sea from land. And it's not really known um, what their ancestry is in terms of uh, like what kinds of reptiles they're derived from or what have you. Uh, but it is known that they were true seafaring reptiles in the sense that they never returned to land, and that's evident in their skeleton because their nares are placed high on the skull, for one, kind of like in dolphins or whales, and two, they gave live birth, and that's evident from remains that were found in the rib cage of at least one ichthyosaur fossil, if not more than that. And ichthyosaur really means fish lizard because of its body form. And if you see one of my slides, there's a picture of a shark and a dolphin, and then at the bottom there should be an ichthyosaur, but it cut it off. And it's because really ichthyosaurs were kind of the Mesozoic equivalent of whales or dolphins. Um, Probably I would compare them more to porpoises, and I'll get more to that in a minute. Or even orcas or something along there. The toothed whales more than the baleen whales. They were very agile swimmers. Um, and there's some debate on whether or not they were warm-blooded, and same goes for dinosaurs, and I don't think they were. They were probably cold-blooded. But like sea turtles or like sea snakes, they had, they were active in the water, and they were probably, at least to some extent, gigantotherms because of their body mass, um, in some of them. But during the Mesozoic era, especially the early Mesozoic, the Earth was a lot warmer, and so being warm-blooded wasn't as much of a advantage as it is today. Um, and I think I might have touched on it before, but mammals actually precede dinosaurs. They evolved earlier than dinosaurs did, but they were outcompeted by dinosaurs. And to get more back to my point, so ichthyosaurs first arrived about 250 million years ago and died off about 90 million years ago in sort of the late-ish Cretaceous. And the reasons aren't really known why. If I had to guess, it would probably be, or not guess, but surmise, it would probably be because, one, they were the most abundant during the Triassic, like earliest Triassic, before plesiosaurs ever evolved. But once plesiosaurs entered the scene, their diversity kind of decreased. Um, Probably as a result of the competition that plesiosaurs presented. And then during the Cretaceous, the early Cretaceous, you had the evolution of mosasaurs, which I'll talk about in more detail here in a minute. Um, But yeah, so what did they eat? Probably fish and mollusks like ammonites, possibly smaller ichthyosaurs, but they had such delicate skulls, I don't see them eating whatever they wanted. Because most people, if you ask like what a predatory reptile would eat, they'd be like, oh, anything they want. I don't think that was the case for plesiosaurs, just because they had such narrow muzzles, and very delicately built skulls. Um, they probably did breathe very similarly to the way that you see dolphins and whales breathing, where I'm guessing they would probably just, um, surface barely, like just enough to take a breath, and then re enter the water, or maybe hover there for a few minutes while they took in a couple breaths and then re entered the water, or submerged, I guess. The I mentioned it previously, but today, like the largest group of marine reptiles is the sea snakes. But of course, in the Mesozoic, it was way more diversified than that. And really, um, like the second earliest marine reptile were the plesiosaurs. And I've already kind of mentioned this, but the plesiosaurs showed up in the Triassic after ichthyosaurs did. And they were around up until like the late Cretaceous as well, like the Cretaceous extinction, and they had a pretty much global distribution. But along in a very similar way to the ichthyosaurs, their diversity really shot down with the arrival of mosasaurs in the early Cretaceous. But the plesiosaurs probably are derived from archosaurs, and meaning that they come from the same group as crocodilians, birds, and dinosaurs. Um, they probably are derived from that group. And they are very famous for having the long necks like Nessie, and there's a lot of debate on whether or not they could like stick their neck vertically up through the water like Nessie does. It probably ranged depending on the species, their neck flexibility or whatever. Kind of like sauropods, which that will be a completely different video, but I'll talk about that later. Um, Whereas there's not a whole lot known about ichthyosaurs except for what we can tell by their skeletons and their body plan, really more than anything. Um, Being that they were very fish-like and definitely um, probably pelagic marine predators in the ocean. The plesiosaurs, was a little bit more known about them. The main thing being, I compared ichthyosaurs to like dolphins and orcas and that sort of thing, or porpoises. And I'd compare plesiosaurs more to like the baleen whales, where it's like they're they probably weren't very agile, first of all, because they kind of used their flippers like paddles to kind of glide through the water. And they would have been very slow moving through the water in that way, compared to the other marine reptiles and fish and things. Which is kind of probably where their long necks and narrow skulls came into play, was like the surprise factor of, being able to just kind of not necessarily ambushing something, but not having to come up on something like an ichthyosaur would have to do. Um, it had some reach to it. And whether or not it could stick its head up out of the water, like like Nessie or whatever, while it's being debated, it probably, depending on the configuration of the vertebrae, some of them probably could, whether the bones would actually allow for that range of motion. And you can see by the illustrations that it is very much debated on exactly how much motion some of them are allowed in their neck, based off their soft tissues too. So I'm about to